The biblical account of Joseph, 1745 BC to 1635 BC. The name Joseph means God will increase. Joseph is Jacob's 11th out of 12 sons. Introduction. Joseph was undeniably Jacob's favorite son. Jacob gave Joseph a coat of many colors, which caused his brothers to become very jealous of Joseph. Joseph's brothers set out to kill him in a fit of envy. Only one brother, Reuben, protected Joseph from his brother's hands. And instead of killing Joseph, his brother Judah persuaded them to sell Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. Joseph was then sold by the Ishmaelite merchants to Egypt and sold to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. Joseph becomes a favorite slave in Egypt. Joseph was very intelligent, knowing how to count, read, and write, which Potiphar found uncommon in other slaves in Egypt. So Potiphar made Joseph head of his household. Potiphar's house was blessed by Joseph, so much so that Potiphar trusted Joseph to be in charge of all that he had. Joseph falsely imprisoned 12 years in Egypt. Now Joseph was a very handsome young man of great integrity, and Potiphar's wife demanded the attention of the young man. Joseph, being a man of integrity, resisted her advances, but Potiphar's wife tore a piece of Joseph's clothing and cried out with a loud voice that Joseph assaulted her. And look, he left a piece of his clothing. Potiphar was very grieved that he must send Joseph to prison. Joseph remained in prison for 12 years. The King of Dreams. During Joseph's 12th year of prison, the Pharaoh has a recurring dream that his fortune tellers cannot interpret. This caused great distress to the Pharaoh that he could not find a valid interpreter of his dreams. It was then that someone remembered Joseph and told the Pharaoh, "I know a man in prison that can interpret dreams." It was at that time that Joseph was released from prison and brought before the Pharaoh to interpret his dream. Joseph is able to tell the Pharaoh the interpretation of his dream. You will have 7 years of prosperity and then 7 years of great famine throughout Egypt. If you want your kingdom to survive, you must store up your harvest during the prosperous years to have a reserve during the years of great famine. Joseph becomes governor of Egypt. Pharaoh was amazed by Joseph's knowledge and adorned Joseph with linen, gold chains, and the government ring, putting Joseph in charge of all Egypt and storing up the grain. The Israelites inhabit Egypt. The famine spread all over the earth, and many travelers went to Egypt to purchase of the corn reserves. Joseph's brothers also went to Egypt and bowed down at Joseph's feet to buy corn. Joseph wept for his brothers and his father and invited them to live in the land on the northernmost side of Egypt called Goshen, because shepherds were an abomination to the Egyptians. Joseph lived 110 years and was embalmed and placed in a coffin in Egypt. Joseph's family lived in Egypt 215 years, and the Egyptians forgot all about Joseph. The Israelites multiplied much faster than the Egyptians, and the Egyptians grew fearful of them and began to rule over them harshly, and called them the Hebrews, which means other side. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Biblical Joseph. Please join us for the next episode of Biblical Moses. Thank you.